Hey, welcome to the Lake City Church podcast. So grateful you've joined us. We're going to be talking about anger in the household, specifically with families, parents, and kids. And I'm joined today by Atara Parkinson. Atara, welcome.
Thank you.
So good to have you here.
So good to be here.
Before we really jump in, could you just give us a little bit of your background, introducing you to our families here at Lake City, and just get to hear a little bit more about you?
Absolutely. Well, hey, everyone out there. Again, my name is Atara Parkinson, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. A mouthful, right? But what this means is I'm a mental health clinician, and I've been practicing in the field of mental health for 14 years. And gosh, that makes me feel so old every time I say that, right?
Yeah.
But what I've had the privilege of doing over the years is getting a really broad experience, all the way from community clinic work and just people coming in off of the street, really some low income families there kind of in survival mode. And I got to do some amazing work with the littles, so the 2 to 8 years old. And what we did was parenting and live coaching parents in play. And the goal of this was really to help reunify that dyad connection between parent and child. There was often a lot of anger. There was domestic violence in these homes, so a lot of things going on. So it was such a privilege to get to walk with them and reunifying, the family. And then also the second step to that was getting some compliance and obedience back in line. Yeah. And then over the years, as I transitioned into private practice, God really brought anxious kiddos into my path. And so I've had a lot of children with anxiety symptoms come along, and I don't believe in treating just the child. We treat the family in my practice. So it's never just dealing with the child. It's also dealing with what's going on in the household, what's going on with parents, what are we modeling, right, as well. Yeah. And so that is kind of in a nutshell some of my practice. What I mainly do now as well is called somatic therapy. And traditional talk therapy is a top-down approach. So looking at our logic, our thinking, what the field has really shifted in realizing that we also need a bottom-up approach. What is my body informing me, and how does it impacting the emotions I'm feeling? And so I do a lot of that work these days.
Cool. And married, and how many kids?
Oh my gosh, married for 10 years with 4 children. Okay. So it's been a busy 10 years.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
Their ages now are 8, 7, 5, and 2.
Yeah. And
so in the trenches.
Lots of practical stories from at home too, with raising kids and what this looks like. And, well, some of this came about as we got connected last year, is talking with families in our church, raising kiddos, and just some of these emotions rising up in the home. Yeah. And parents naturally wanting to better understand what's going on, how to handle this, boundaries to put in place. How do we set maybe even consequences, and what can those look like? And so just love to have that conversation today as we talk about some of this anger management in the household, and not just from the kids, but from parents as well, as we deal with just some tension-filled situations.
Absolutely.
So I got a question to start us off with, and then we'll kind of just launch into some of this. The first one is, how are we conditioned to look at anger culturally as Christians?
Oof, great question. And I think we often demonize anger. We look at anger and we say, well, that causes chaos, and it can cause some intense reactions or behaviors, and therefore the tendency is to just squash it. Right? Don't engage with it. Get that out of here. Get that out of me. Essentially run from it, or stuff it down. And actually what we want to be doing is the exact opposite. And what that is connecting, right? And understanding what is at the root or the heart of this emotion that I am feeling. Okay. And in order to do that, we need to connect with it. And so I actually don't even like the term anger management, because that is just, how am I dealing with the surface level, but more so anger transformation. How am I going to listen to the messages that anger is telling me, and then utilize that to help tune in, and then also to transform it? Because anger is not all bad. Actually, the Bible does warn us, right, about anger when it's without cause, when it's prolonged, these kinds of things. But anger in itself is not a bad thing. But we do want to look at and ask this core question of, what is my anger telling me? What is the message here under my anger?
Interesting. So when you ask the question, what is your anger telling you? I think as adults, we can better do that.
Yes.
But today we're going to really jump into with our kids. And so, I mean, how do you tell a 4-year-old, like, what's your anger telling you?
Yeah.
Can you? I guess I've never tried that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you're bringing up a great point. And this is that we first have to start with the parent. Yeah. Right? And we have to be the model for our children of how am I going to deal with this emotion? Because you're absolutely right. At that 4-year-old, there is no ability, well, there's some ability, but very limited ability to regulate, as we call it. And this is not, one kid. This is overall. This is age developmentally. They are pretty much incapable of regulation. And so what's required here when we talk about nervous system is the concept of co-regulation. So that, and this is really obvious with those little babies, that they are incapable of calming down until they are picked up and soothed. And why that's soothing is because they're tuning in to us and our state of regulation. But even 4, 5, 16, not quite capable even then, because regulation is in the prefrontal cortex that doesn't get developed fully until mid-20s, right? Yeah, so we need to first look at, as a parent, I have to regulate. I have to bring myself calm in order then to coach and help my child.
Okay, that's a great point.
So with, kids, you're trying to teach that and show that. What about as an adult, if you've never learned to do that? Like, is there some like habits you have to break, or that seems like a lot more work because you're kind of having to deconstruct probably a lot.
That's absolutely right. So anger is also really tied to patterns in our brain. And what we learn over time is that when I have this emotion, there's a thought and feeling that is going with that. And so there's also a reaction tied. And so if we can get to really the core of the trigger, then we can notice and we can put a like a pin there of, oh, this really gets me upset. Practical example, right? I'm a timely person. I really value being on time.
Tell me more.
Me too.
My 4 small children, not so much, right? So when we're rushed or trying to get out the door, I often notice that's a space where my anger could get triggered. Now, the anger has a voice. The anger is saying something in this moment. And I'd love to ask the two of you, when you notice, maybe I have an agenda and my children are not cooperating with this agenda, what is the message that your brain starts to give you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's the value of time and like the value of sort of like what we've put in place. Perfect. Or like a real example for us is my 2 older ones that I take to school in the morning, they want to get to school early, but then sometimes those morning rhythms falter, and they're the ones why we're late. But so they're upset they're late, but I'm also upset that they're late. And then by the time we get in the car, it's like best to just be silent, even though I maybe had the best intentions to ask a thought-provoking question this morning or things like that. It just like kind of landslides off, I feel like.
It's a good observation.
And in those moments, I'm like, well, sometimes things happen. Sometimes that's because I'm opposite of that. I don't worry as much about timeliness. If there's like, sometimes life happens, and so that's something we have to walk through because we have opposite things in that space. Yeah. When I'm overwhelmed, when there's too many things in my mind.
It's a great one too.
And there's like one more thing added, or that is like, and so sometimes the thing that's added isn't even that big of a deal, but because there's so many things already in there, it's like it can then anger can come out.
Such a common experience for moms. I work with a lot of moms, and our brain is wired a little different from men, and it's to take in everything in the environment. So where my husband can walk by the dishes in the sink because that's not providing or protecting in his brain, right? Which is how he's wired. My brain picks up on that and goes, that's got to get done. And they scream at me until they are done, right? Until that's accomplished. So that we have to also acknowledge like the way that we are wired. But to go back to these examples of anger, I use 4 statements that really can help parents identify what is happening in this process. And the first is, I feel triggered when, right? So I feel triggered when we're running late. I feel triggered when there's so much going on in the environment. Because they should. And so what is the should? Yeah, when you're getting upset at the kids, what is the should there that you are making up?
Like at bedtime, it's like, you brush your teeth every night.
It's a great one.
Every night. For the rest of your life, for the previous every night of your life.
You shouldn't need a reminder.
You shouldn't know that, you're supposed to brush your teeth.
Right. Yeah. There's the should, right? And my should is that they should understand time, or they should understand I don't like to be late, right? And then the next one is because I feel, and that's tied to there too, because I feel time is important, because I feel being on time is respectful of someone else's time, right? And then the last one is because I remember as a child. And this is not to say all the time that our anger is connected to some generational stuff, but a lot of times it is, right? And sorry, Mom, I'm going to put you on blast, right? But I remember my mom is a fast mover, right? And she wasn't necessarily the most patient under pressure as well. And so all of this informs, right, my perspective here. Yeah. And let's go back real quick to that should, which so many parents have this mindset of my kids should be able to do this, right? They should be able at this point to brush their teeth by now. Right. They should be sleeping through the night. They should be getting themselves in bed. All of these shoulds. And what is really important here is to go from shoulds to skills. Right? And if we can just shift with that mindset of, oh, this is still a skill we are building. This is something that we're learning. We're in the process of this still. With time, for example, as we're rushing around putting on shoes and, hopefully I'm not yelling yet, right? Let's go. I can pause. We'll get back to that pause in a second, right? Okay. I can pause and recognize, oh, yeah, my 8-year-old doesn't really have a concept of time yet, or even timeliness. And that's a skill that we are working on. And we can see how this would really quickly shift our internal state and create more empathy and understanding versus that anger and frustration. So we talked about the quick thoughts, right? And you mentioned this too, in that state of overwhelm. And what really starts to happen with anger is we start to move really quickly. And we often, in anger, can spew our thoughts, right? These thoughts that are happening inside start to bubble up and come out. And what we really are warned against biblically is that spewing, right? There's so verse after verse on our anger being quick, right? Not responding quickly in our anger, but really slowing it down. And so we want to be able to take those thoughts captive. And the way that I help parents do this is by a little acronym called FAT thoughts. Okay. So what's first, maybe? I'm forgetting the first one, but first, automatic, and thoughts, right? So noticing when my thoughts start moving really quickly, can I catch them and stop them from creating this escalation?
Yeah, I feel like the escalation thing is a big deal, because as we would ramp up our frustration, it seems like our kids would match that and escalate that. That's
right.
And so it's I don't think it's fair to expect the child to de-escalate. I think that's why this parent part is so important, is because that's our responsibility first and foremost.
That's right. To model, to help slow it down, to take a breath. I am a verbal processor, so out loud. So I even often will say in the environment, I'm feeling really anxious right now, or I'm feeling really frustrated that we're not out the door yet. Or even if my kid is back talking a lot, I will just say out loud, gosh, I'm starting to really feel frustrated by this conversation. And that is a clue to myself, right? That something's happening and we need to slow it down. I've noticed too, it's a clue to my kiddos. They sometimes will back off a little bit when things are getting intense. Yeah. And it's a moment to shift and a moment to encourage connection instead of this continued pattern that we've created.
I think one other trick that we've stumbled into a little bit, is that there are times where Jackie and I, one of us will be far more frustrated than the other, and the other one will kind of tag in.
Yeah, tag team it. And be like, all right, let's take a break.
Yeah, as one of us escalates in our frustration, the other one will kind of like maybe cut off, and just because they're
Yes.
not as frustrated by the moment, and then they can better respond to the kid, whichever one it is.
Absolutely. Yes. And that actually is another example of co-regulation, right? Is we co-regulate with each other as well. And absolutely utilizing, again, that family unit to be of support to one another.
Yeah.
And say, I've even said before, I need a minute here, right? I think you used the phrase tap out. I've
Yeah.
said that, I've said that so many times. Tap out. I need a moment.
Yeah.
Please help. And, even a couple minutes, 30 seconds away from that situation can really bring a renewed sense of calm.
Yeah.
And that's when I also get into the somatic work, right? When our nervous system is going offline, it's this fight or flight state. And I like to say that nervous system does not know the difference between taxes and tigers. And what that means is you can be in a stressful situation. My taxes are due. Oh my gosh, there's a lot I have to get together. And you could be being chased by a tiger. Your nervous system is going to respond the same. Yeah. And so really getting that nervous system back into regulation before we can respond is so important.
Yeah.
The lower brain stem cells where all of the energy is going in that moment, which means that none of the energy or resources going to our logical brain.
Perfect.
So,
There we go.
so we got to slow it down.
Right then.
Yeah, so some ways to do this that are really practical are opening up our peripheral vision. Again, these are great. You can even use these with kiddos. Kiddos love body work. They're actually more in tune with their body than we typically are as adults. They're more aware. And so just swinging your head from side to side helps signal to the body, because our peripherals actually close when we're in that fight or flight state.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes.
It's really interesting because you have to be, because if you really do have to fight or flight, you have to be focused on getting away or
on the danger.
challenge. Yeah.
Absolutely. Great observation, right? I always take it back to caveman days, right? What was going on? A predator was approaching. I needed to keep myself safe and be really focused. Getting outside is a great one. This also signals safety to our body, right? When we can see an open space. And so with mamas with littles, this is something that I would suggest. But even with bigger kids, right? You can say, hey, let's go ahead and take this conversation to the patio, right? And what we're doing here is actually twofold. We're creating movement. Right? We're walking the body, which also helps that energy. All emotion is energy in the body. So what we typically see, if you look at a toddler with anger, you will see it very viscerally, that energy, right? They, right? And they shake or their face turns red. And so we want to help that energy move through the body. And so walking somewhere else or creating a different scene really helps reset. And then again, getting into that outdoor space helps as well.
That's what I feel like I've seen that with our kids in moments of frustration, when it's frustrating as a parent to be like, why won't you stop fixating on like, why is this making you so angry? It's like in their mind, they can see one thing that made them angry. And even like them, like not wanting to like maybe look at you or trying to like close in. It's like it's all focused in on that one thing, and getting them to be outside of that can help them regulate.
Absolutely.
That's cool.
Yeah. And you're making a good point, which is that anger is essentially protection. That's what anger is trying to do. If you can imagine kind of like this shield around us, and what it is upholding are maybe our sense of agency. Right? You think of the littles, I want to do it myself. Right? Yeah. Our values. Fairness. I cannot tell you how many times with my second born,
Ours too.
that strong-willed one, that I have been like, hey, like, what's going on? Where do you think this reaction's coming from? And now she's 6 or 7, so she has enough wherewithal to verbalize. That wasn't fair. You'll hear that so often. Maybe it's essentials, hungry, tired, right? Overworked or stressed, overwhelmed, you mentioned. Maybe it's a disconnection, right? So what happens is all of these things are kind of held up around us, and when they get pierced, right? That's when we'll see this kind of flare of anger. So really observing or trying to understand, whether it's within yourself or enlisting your kiddo and helping bring their awareness to, I felt like my boundaries were really violated in that moment. They won't say that, right? In that way, but we can help them. The other important one is what's called flow. which is a state of being when we're really in wonderful focus, when an activity isn't too overwhelming that we're frustrated, but it's also not too easy that we're bored. But it's this perfect balance of this flow state. And I know I've been in it, and when my kids have interrupted it, I get a little testy, right? And so this is something to look for in ourselves, but also to look for in them. Are they in flow? We could talk about phones probably a lot, but phones phones are often a state of, we're in a flow state when we're replying back to someone, or our kid maybe is sending a text message, and then we get interrupted. Maybe we're at the dinner table and we're like, no phones at the dinner table. And they don't even hear the first time. And then we say it again, right? And they're like, okay, yeah, mom. But they're still trying to do it. They're in flow in that moment. So maybe instead having a renegotiation, right, around like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing over there? And having them verbalize, yes, I know I need to put my phone down. Is it okay if I just send this, right? And having a renegotiation, what is acceptable in your family unit?
Yeah, that's a great thing. Something came to mind as we were talking about just anger even among parents is the idea of forgiveness and the importance of that, of modeling that.
Yes.
I'd love to touch on that before even answering some other questions we have of how important is forgiveness and how do we model that well with our kids?
Yeah. It's essential. Yeah. That's what I'll say. It is foundational. It is actually the crux of relationship, is being able to forgive and step out of bitterness, because holding on to that bitterness is just going to create more resentment, more anger as we go. And so I have parents all the time say to me, oh man, Atara, I really messed that one up, right? And I said, well, have you repaired, right? It's never too late to go back. We see adults, right, go to their parents on their deathbed and still have a moment of repair. So not until you are with Jesus and the last breath has left your body is it too late, right, to repair on this side of heaven. And so it's essential. And I also go through a relationship ladder with my couples that are recovering from betrayal. And what we recognize here is that forgiveness is that bottom rung. And we have trust and respect. And at the very top, we have love. But what this tells us is we cannot have love without these other things underneath, right? Really holding love up. And forgiveness is that bottom rung. So it's absolutely essential.
No, that's really good. I think that's been a challenging thing. I think challenging for anybody, but personally with kids is whether it's raising your voice or saying or disciplining even the wrong kid. Just that can just easily happen. You have the same ages and things like that, and just going back. And then sometimes it's easier for me when it's just a little bit later. Like you can step away from the moment and then be like, hey, bud, you come to my office. Hey, I'm really sorry I said this in this way. Like I was frustrated by this. How would you even advise modeling that for kids? Because I think in some ways too, in my mind, I want to be in some ways overly communicative in situations like that, even though it's challenging.
Yeah. Yes. So that I think is a perfect model, what you said, and teaching them that it's okay, first of all, to go take your minute, right? It's okay to sense what's happening in your body. A simple way to do this with littles is what are you feeling, or where are you feeling something in your body? And a kiddo actually very quickly, you'll be surprised, will go, right here, my tummy is tight. Or I have, energy, not energy, they'll say like butterflies or something. Yeah. Or my head is tense or hot, right? They'll be able to recognize. And then from there, we can lead them into the next step, which is like, just curiosity, right? What do you think that is? What's going on in there? And then this guides us. This is the first step of taking that emotion or thought captive and understanding what's happening internally. And then it adds that pause. And then we can shift into, okay, well, how are we going to handle this then, right? What are we going to do about this? And it's funny to me, we have very different personalities. It's amazing to me that you can have 4 children
for sure
from the same 2 people that are so different, right? And so I have, my eldest is methodical, right? A lot of wisdom for an 8-year-old, but much slower, right, around these kind of things like dad. And my second born is much more like me, quick, we want to get it done, right, get to the issue and move on with life. But noticing just what you have before you and then allowing space for them to deal with how they're going to deal with it. What I'll say is always circle back, however, right? And make sure that this gets addressed. And so creating some kind of system in your home of how are you going to do that? Is that going to be a nightly routine of like, do we need to extend forgiveness? Do we need to follow up on conversation? Is it going to be a weekly ritual of a family meeting, maybe on Sunday afternoons of, hey, let's talk about how we did this week together, right? How did I show up for you well? Maybe is there some way that you felt disappointed, right, about me or another family member, right, that we kind of had a miss? And how can I support you this week? Right? What is coming up for you this next week where maybe one kiddo has a big test, maybe there's a driving, experience they want to feel supported around. Maybe it's a presentation at school. Maybe it's a parent having something big. And how can I support you and be present for you that day? And in what way do you need that?
I like that idea of circling back, having like a set time. I think what's hard is when you're in a moment, you're leaving the house. I think that's one of the hardest things is navigating. At what point do you push and ask? Because asking questions, that's why I heard you be doing a lot there, is asking a lot of questions. Yeah. Sometimes there's not time for that.
That's right.
Sometimes you're in a store and there's an outburst and you're like, we just got to get out of this store in one piece, And so it's like, when do you like put a pin in it? Like when do you attack it right there? Do you have any advice for those situations?
Yeah, so it really is dependent on like your style and your home. What I would do in a grocery store is actually just pause right there in the grocery store. I would stop my kiddo, get down and be like, hey, like, what's going on? What's up? What is this coming from? And have a conversation if possible. Now, there's other kids right there. And so parenting is all about creativity. I gotta be so creative. Sure. So I might task them with something. I might say, hey, can you guys play this little game in the cart while we have a quick conversation? If I can get to the root of it quickly, it is dependent on the kiddo, then I will. Sometimes it can't get resolved in the moment. So I will say something like, I hear you. And, this is a bigger issue. And I think we're going to need more time to figure this out. So if right now, this is what I need from you. And if you can clearly give some markers, like all I need from you is to walk with me, right? And keep yourself safe. Maybe, right, is the instructions in the store. And so giving them some parameters, again, we talked about boundaries earlier, right? We do always need some boundaries in place and for them to know the expectation from us. But also trying to elicit from them, is there anything you need from me? And sometimes my two olders will go, you stop, maybe you could stop saying this. And I'm like, all right, I hear you. Like, okay, one time one got so testy about, I was just being teasing, but he really didn't like, whatever I was saying. I was calling him like barbecue boy or something. And he was like all offended by that. So that might be some feedback, right? Being willing to hear and take the feedback that they're telling us, right? It's this two-way street. And the more that we can model that empathetic approach, the more they're going to be willing to give it back to us.
Yeah, in some ways respecting our kids too. And
absolutely.
But I know there's definitely moments when those younger ones, there is no reasoning or any way to like fix it. And so, when you have a maybe a 4, 5, 6-year-old that is going into like rage mode and like the screaming and the throwing things, maybe the breaking things, this is something that I think we've all experienced to some degree. And there's a struggle with, I think, first off of, I'm a terrible parent, but then also, what do I even do in those moments?
Yes, absolutely. So I want to go back to I'm a terrible parent because that's important too. Sure. But first, right, with those littles, acknowledging and naming is super important. So saying something like, oh, right? I see that there's a lot going on over there. Or even I see your face is flushed, or I see that, your fists are clenched, right? Naming what we see happening. We could also make an interpretation for that age, and they might accept it or not. That's,
sure.
They went, no, that's not it, right?
Yeah,
I've had that. But we could say, I'm wondering if you're feeling frustrated, right? And sometimes, even for really little, my youngest, who's 2.5, she will I can see the wheels turning as I say that. She's like, oh yeah, I am, right? As I say that and help her acknowledge that. And not to say that always shifts things, but it is helpful, and it's helpful for them to have that awareness being built. And then we can model, right? What are appropriate ways to deal with this emotion? And so I will then, instead of prescribing like you should or you need to, that usually just escalates things more. Yeah. I am going to say, this is what I do when I'm feeling this way. So I know when I'm really frustrated, I like to take my body outside. Right? Or when I'm really angry, I like to take a deep breath. Right? Sometimes they'll do it with us. Sometimes they won't.
Right, sure.
Yes. Or when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I like to have a minute to myself in my room. And my 2.5-year-old will be like, yeah, out. Right? And she'll I'll be like, okay, I hear that you want some space. That's great. Right? As she gets older, we will shape that a little bit more so it's not quite as curt. But at that age, that's appropriate. And I will, honor her wishes in that way.
Sure. Yeah. And each kid probably needs something different. And like you said, parenting is creative.
Yes.
And I feel like this is something we've talked about before, Jackie and I, is this idea of a Holy Spirit-driven awareness for each kiddo. Yeah. Because you have 4, we have 3. But knowing full well each of our 3 do handle things different and in different seasons. There's moments where Jackie will be like, there's more overwhelming him. And we have 3 boys, so I'm not even naming each one, right? There's more overwhelming him. And she can sense that more than I can in helping with that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
One of the questions from parents is, in dealing with the elevated anger and screaming and things from one child, there is a concern for the other siblings. Yep. And because it seems like that if you have more than one kid, you'll have one child that deals more with anger than another. And so the impact that can have on other siblings, the question would just said this way of, how do you help the other siblings who are a victim to the rage of the other sibling? Yeah,
absolutely. So it's a great question, right? With all the dynamics flowing around in the household. And so I want to go back to the boundaries, right? Boundaries are super important. And so if a kid is escalating to hitting another sibling, throwing something at another sibling, Legos, breaking Legos, right? Man, that's such a thing in our house. Totally. He broke my Lego, right? Breaking Legos out of anger, this kind of someone else's creation, right? This kind of thing. It's our job, right, as parents, to come around and protect and guide the behavior. Okay. So that's where we're going to set really strong limitations of, I understand there's frustration here. You're allowed to be frustrated, and I can't let you do this behavior, or this is not safe for us, or this isn't fair for our household. Yeah. So what can I give the kid instead? Sometimes that's not in the moment, right? We need to notice again that none of the energy is going to their logical brain, that isn't fully developed in this moment. But after we come down out of this, we can talk about and make a plan for next time. So next time you're feeling upset, right, here are some things we can do. If your kid is old enough to read, or you can draw pictures of some of the options, right? Noticing what things make you feel calm. When I'm by myself, maybe it is building Legos, right? My oldest, maybe when I'm in my room building with my Legos, that's helps me calm down. Okay, great. So I'm going to create a little box, and we're going to create a space for him to do so when he's feeling overwhelmed or upset. And I'm going to say, okay, I sense you're feeling frustrated. Is that accurate? Yes. My sister, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. Do you want to go take a minute with the Legos like we talked about? Yeah, I do want to do that. Or maybe it's my really active third born. I'm going to have him run around the house. Right? He's my all boy, right? Yeah. He's going to need to do laps or jump on the trampoline or something like this. Yeah. But creating this plan, because in the moment, right, as you mentioned, it's overwhelming. We're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed. It feels like chaos.
Yeah.
So having a written plan for yourself, for the kiddos, that we can go to and look. And also, what's really important here is research shows that if we have if-then statements, we're much more likely to be successful in our goal.
Okay.
So if I'm feeling frustrated, I will blank. I will go draw. I will go take some deep breaths. I'll go run a lap around the house. Okay? That's the plan. But there's also a contingency here, right? If I can't calm down, or if this happens, then this will happen, right? So if that first plan doesn't go as well as I had hoped, then this is what's going to happen. Mom will help me get to a safe place in the house for me. Often that's like, maybe your bed, some soft spots. If you have like a corner of a playroom that you can put some pillows, some squeeze balls, different things like this, some different options for them to release that emotion in a safe way, that's going to be great. So again, depending on age, the first step is something hopefully they can do by themselves. And then the contingency is, if it's escalating too much, here's what we can do instead.
How do you balance that with consequence and discipline, right? Because especially at a certain age, when it's like, you should know, or when it, hitting a sibling or doing something or saying something mean, and it's an expectation, like, we don't do that. At what point do you dish out consequence? And because I think that consequence is something ingrained in, I think, most parents. Like, well, if you do something, there's natural consequences. There's consequences we put in. Maybe it's taking something away. And obviously we're talking about moments of anger here, not just anything, lying, or there's other reasons for consequences, breaking trust in different ways. But so specifically with anger, when is the moment for a consequence?
Yeah, so I'm going to say it's going to be an and both here. Okay. And what I mean by that is we don't have to have the empathy and the understanding without the consequence. We can have both operating. And so it really is situational dependent. It really is age dependent. But what I'll say generally is we can meet with empathy, understand the emotion, and then if there is an action that's happened that's harmed someone else, we can then have a natural consequence for that. And again, we explain that after de-escalation. But for example, Legos, maybe a realistic consequence in my household would be, you broke your brother's Legos. And so for the next day or two, you're unfortunately going to be, I wouldn't say banned, but we're going to put a pause on Legos for you. And that's a natural consequence, for example, of Lego breaking. And I'm going to explain this very clearly. I think this happens often. Kids, I always want to check in. Kids don't always understand why they're having a consequence. So we want to be really clear on that. And we want it to make sense as well. I don't want to just do something arbitrary. And I also want to do it age appropriately. So this would be a consequence. I'm talking about my 5-year-old, him losing Legos for a day or two. Plenty, right? His sense of time is very narrow right now. So saying 2 weeks is
that's beyond.
Beyond.
That's eternity.
It's eternity. Good point.
I want to highlight something you said there that's really important. You said after de-escalation. And I think that's something that's more challenging, I would say, maybe for men. I know I've experienced that in the sense of like, because you did this, here's the consequence now. So then, and that doesn't usually help de-escalate when you name
because the kid can get angrier in that moment.
More frustrated. So we've been practicing, and this happened even recently. Something happened that needed a consequence, but we paused till, I want to say an hour later, I talked with him about the consequence for that. And so can you just highlight that a little bit, the importance of that? I feel like that's something we came into late, but we're trying to do a better job.
Well, I think part of your concern coming into that was like, something has to be done. We can't let it go. That feeling of urgency of like, this has to be met with something, because there's truth to that.
You said this, you took this, you broke this.
But if they can't even hear you in the moment, then it's not going to be effective.
That's right. Yeah. So we are going into like the trigger, which is on the top, on the surface. And if we imagine a house, right, this might be a crack in the wall or the house is leaning. This is things like, I can't take this noise, the sensory stuff. This is exhausting, overwhelm or depletion. I need to be alone, right? There's a connection or disconnection. I could just scream. These are the surface issues, and this is what we see. But underneath this, for a parent or for a child, are beliefs. And the beliefs are the foundation of the house. It's what is impacting, right? So you mentioned a belief of like, this is one I think for moms a lot, maybe for dads, I'm a failure. Right? These kids, they just don't listen, and I am failing at this, right? And that then is going to dictate, or can dictate if we're not aware, the behavior. And this might cause the jumping in, the maybe extreme when we say something like, you're losing your phone for a year. And because we're feeling really strongly about it. Yeah. So we have to be really cognizant of, can I attach to what is the belief operating here in my parenting, right? And can I get clear about that before I respond first? And then absolutely right, giving time. And I would say, you know, the Bible warns us, don't let the sun go down on your anger. So I would say if we can get back to it before the day is done, ideally, that's great. So sometimes it might be an hour. Sometimes it might be until that kid has had food in their body, right? So notice, especially with your littles, well, big kids too, right? Yeah. Teenagers get hungry. Yeah, so noticing, oh my gosh, it's 11:30 and we typically eat at noon and we're having real big issues right now. Let's get some food in us first, take a breath, and then talk about whatever is going on. If it's with the littles that take naps, let's get them napped, and then we can circle back to, oh, you know, what happened the other day? Oh man, guys, this was a good one. Someone took the toilet paper holder and it fell in the toilet.
Yes,
And then another child went to the restroom and flushed that down the toilet. So everyone, you know, clearly my husband had to take the whole toilet off the floor, to go in there and get it. He was pretty upset, and he, right, consequences. And I was like, I'm with you. Now is not the moment, right, to do this.
That sounds very frustrating.
It was very frustrating. So how can we, and so we came back to it, right? He got the toilet taken care of, put it back on, and he's, you know, these kids, and I said, all right, let's just shut that door. Let's shut that door for a couple hours, and let's talk about how we want to handle this, and let's come back to this, and we came to some good conclusions about how they were going to clean the bathroom or whatever. But kind of taking a moment to simmer down, and vice versa for your kids, noticing when they're escalated, when they're feeling more calm, and then coming back to the issue a little bit later on and being able to calmly say, you know, bud, this happened. I know it was in a moment of frustration, and our actions still have consequences, even if they're in a moment of heated emotion. And so what the consequence here is going to be is blah, 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 and calmly explaining it.
Something else that now we're just kind of doing counseling, but we've tried to work on is talking to each other before handing out a consequence. There's small things that we'll do, but
because we don't always think the same way of what a consequence should be, depending on the offense.
Something's more important maybe at times, or especially if they do something to her, I feel like the consequence should be bigger, where she might not feel the same way. So how important is that in the dynamic of the household, and have you worked at all with that? Have you seen that come to light, or is that just us?
No, I don't think so. And I just want to commend first on like following, right, that masculine need to protect, right? And I'm with you. When I see my husband react the strongest is if one of them lashes out to whack me or is doing being verbally disrespectful to me, I will see a stronger reaction in my husband, which thanks, honey. And also, hold on, right? So absolutely, I would say with the big things, as much as possible, talking it out, even having some ideas of how we might want to handle something before, and then implementing that. And so we kind of already have some ground rules, some agreements of these are appropriate consequences for these kinds of actions. And this is what we're like hard line. This is what we're not going to do in our house. And one of those in our house is shaming, right? So we get frustrated when there's something that is in the should category, but we realize, okay, maybe it's a skill. An example recently was our 5-year-old, been potty trained for a couple years now, had an accident because he was just really into whatever he was doing. Yeah. And my husband and I were like, right?
Yes, for sure.
What? And there can be a natural inclination to talk to him like, what the heck, bud? What's going on? Why are you doing that? Like, you know better. Yeah. And maybe inadvertently, we don't always realize this, but what is that creating in his mind? And so how can I shift that from, again, we go back to those spewing thoughts, right? How can I go back to, okay, yeah, this is frustrating. I think he should know better. To, okay, maybe he's changing developmentally and he got distracted. And also, what are some natural things I can implement here? Like having him put his clothes in the washer machine. He's old enough to do that. Maybe even start the load, right? Again, this is an opportunity to teach as well. Sure. Talking about what do we do next time, right? Like that you feel like you have to go potty, stop and go right away. That's what we do, right? And having a renewed conversation around this.
Something I'd love to talk a little bit more about, and this came about from a few questions from parents here, is how to lovingly tell or hint to a spouse that they are responding or parenting in anger.
I love this question. I love this question.
Anonymous.
Because it's hard to hear from your spouse sometimes. Like sometimes that's like that's a trigger.
Yes.
Because inside, how dare you tell me that? That sort of feeling.
For sure. Yeah. And so first, can we just recognize, right, our internal entitlement or maybe pride coming up in that moment, and gently, right? I think that was the question, which is so good. Good on you for having the awareness, right? Around gentle is the best approach to this. And so first I'd say, maybe don't have this conversation with the swirling of the household going on. It's a great one to have when you're having a quiet moment, maybe a date night after the kids have gone to bed. And I would also use, there's two, the Gottmans, who are couples therapists, and they have a great suggestion of avoiding what's called criticism in a marriage. And their antidote to that is I statements, right? And also if you can give a positive plan of action. So in this situation, I noticed, or I saw that maybe there was a lot of anger, or, oh gosh, when the kiddo did this, it felt like that really impacted you. And first, get curious. A little simple phrase here is curious, not furious, is how I like to say it. Yeah. So getting curious around what was happening for your partner. Can you be empathetic? Can you have understanding? Yes. Oh my gosh, I've told him that 1,000,000 times, and giving him a moment. Yeah. All right. I wonder, like, did you felt like that went well? How did you feel about how that went? Well, maybe I reacted out of anger a little bit. Oh, okay. Yeah. I noticed that too. And then just trying to open up some dialogue. Well, and then the question I think comes next of like, what if your partner is adamant, right, that they handled it well? I think that's a realistic one. Have you guys ever had that situation? Has that happened to you?
I think to certain degrees, maybe you could speak more to it, but I think there's certain times where I felt like there was more of a consequence needed. I felt like maybe in the moment something had to happen. There's certain maybe words that have been said in our home, and my immediate consequence is like hot sauce. So do a spoonful of hot sauce. And it's been less and less, but I guess I felt strongly in the moment, like words needed an immediate correction. Whereas other things, like whether it's, and words are said out of anger, but if there was, I don't know, more hitting, or I guess other things like that, it felt more important to calm the situation. Whereas this word was said out of just a sharp tongue or whatever. Like, you know that is this, especially if I've warned, if you speak that way again, this will be the consequence. So I don't feel like it's out of place.
I don't get as worried about language because that was an issue for me when I was a kid. I was really angry, older elementary, like only at home. Yeah. Only at home. Angel everywhere else. And I had a mouth on me with my mom, especially. My dad, but mainly my mom. And I was close with my parents, and they loved me through that amazingly. But like I know that was me. So for me, it doesn't like stress me out.
Got you.
Like that kind of stuff as much. Like I want it to stop. Like it's important, but I don't know. For me, I'm kind of like, trying to process and figure how to get what's inside out in an appropriate way.
Yes.
I think,
well, I was gonna say, I think for us, when it comes to like maybe getting angry, one of us being like, you're getting angry. I think in the moment we might be defiant to that because I think that's knowing when to talk about it because I think it's hard in the moment because you don't want to be told what to do. I think generally speaking, though, if we come back to it later, we can find understanding for what each other's saying. Yeah. In those calm moments, but that's taken like years of working on communication to figure out.
16 in August.
And so it's been years of working on that and not being perfect ever, but like just trying to like grow each day at it and how to communicate, how to see, I think where the other person's at. You talk about like triggers, those should statements. Like if I can understand why something's making Andrew angry, then I can approach it in a more empathetic way than just being like, stop getting so angry. Yeah. You sound mean.
Yeah, same when Jackie is. She stated before, like, if there's this at work and this at home and this at school and this at sports, by the time we get home, she's more easily agitated because of all the things going on.
Yes.
But I think the biggest thing for us is we've both been able to grow and be able to compromise and come together over time. Yeah. And that's like Jackie said, taken a long time. Like we could, it'd be an all-day podcast if we talked through the seasons of our marriage and the difficulties and things like that.
And I think what's tough is hopefully you can look back and be like, oh, I'd be a better parent 10 years ago. You know, like if I, like,
we'll be better grandparents.
Yeah. If I could parent my kids as toddlers with what I've learned now, I'd be a much better mom to toddlers. But that's not how life works. Yes. And so you have to give yourself a little grace. Yes. Of like, I tried my best in the moment.
Yeah. And knowing that we are going to fail. Yeah. We're going to fail in some way, and that's where we just pray.
Yeah. Ask for forgiveness. Yes. It comes back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing God will step into the deficit that we have as humans in our parenting. Yeah. And I wanted to acknowledge too what you two said about like it's a learning process of this. The phrase that we have in my marriage is same team. Right. And so sometimes if we're coming into a moment, he actually is way more receptive than I am to hearing feedback about anger. Admittedly, it's one of those areas I'm like, I don't like to look at that. I'm not like that, right? But really, I am. I tend to be quicker. I tend to be a little bit more short-tempered, and it's something I've been working on. And so when he comes to me and says, sometimes he'll even start the conversation with, hey, Atara, I love you. Same team. And I'm like, oh, I know what's coming, right? I know what's coming. There is some feedback that might be hard for me to hear, but is also necessary. We also have to get to acknowledge that this person is in my life. This spouse is in my life. God put this person here for me to grow me. Right? And am I welcoming that in my life, or do I shut that off? And am I disconnecting from that? And also, P.S., same thing with my kiddos, right? Yeah. God gave me these kiddos for a specific reason, and I am these kiddos' parents because God knew I was capable, right? And I don't know if there's a more refining process than parenthood, right? It really stretches and grows and highlights the ways that maybe we struggle to be Christ-like. But we can approach that in two ways. We can disconnect and shut that down, or welcome the opportunity and really look at what is needed for me to be more and more sanctified.
That's good. The question just came to mind, and I don't even know if there's a good discussion or answer here, but how does community play into the importance of the household and just I think in how anger and emotions fit in? What is the importance of community? And obviously I'm hinting at like church community and like other believers and friends and things like that.
Yeah. Huge, I think. And remember we talked about the house being on top, some of the triggers like overstimulation, but then there's the foundation at the bottom. And part of that foundation is not feeling like you have a tribe, not feeling like you have support, not feeling like you have other-minded people that are coming alongside you. I cannot tell you every time how many times I've heard, you're doing great, or you're a good parent, right? Every time, no matter how many times I hear that, it hits, right? It hits me in my heart. I'm like, thank God, right?
Yeah.
Right? You can never hear that enough. So having people around you to support, to come in, to give you that break, right? Even if it's just a couple hours. I remember when we had our first 3, and it was 3 and under. So it was a lot. It was a busy household. And we were able to have someone's like preteen, she was about like 12, 13, come into the home and just be what we called a mommy's helper. So it wasn't that expensive. She was like $10 an hour kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I was in the home still, but she was just entertaining them. Yeah. So I could focus on what I was doing. Relief like that, again, getting creative around like what is what I need right now, and where can I call that in, whether it's like emotional support, whether it's just understanding and someone going, yeah, I feel you, or yeah, my kid does that too. Really? Right? It's so relieving. Or if it's, others calling us, right, to be hired to say, hey, I'm a close friend saying, oh, I'm really noticing this, and you saying, oof, like that hurts to hear, but thank you for the feedback, right? So community is essential. It's foundational in Christ's message. He says, operate in this way for that reason, right? The more that we keep anger behind that door and closed off and hidden, the more it is allowed to fester. I loved your example. Thank you for your vulnerability around being a young kid, right? And the more that was just an internal thing, the stronger it comes out in these moments. Instead of, if we give it a little space appropriately, it's not going to sit and bubble and fester and turn into bitterness or unforgiveness in the household.
Yeah. Another question on here was talking about the idea of, and you already said this, that anger isn't a sin. It's what we do in our anger that becomes sin. Yeah. How do we help kids dealing with anger not to turn mean? Right, process that without throwing.
It's like that worry, like, is my kid becoming a psychopath? I think, there's those moments. There's those moments, especially with kids that maybe even don't seem to understand what their actions. It's like they're laughing at me when I'm correcting them. That sort of thing. That can be a thing because every personality is different, and every kid deals with consequence and realizing they've done something wrong. So how
do you keep that anger from turning into sin or being mean?
Yeah. So we want to first look at the things that typically trigger anger in a kiddo, and these are flow. We talked a little bit about agency. Do they feel like their sense of agency is being removed? Connections. So do they feel disconnected from us or from maybe a friend? I've seen a lot of anger in kiddos, like, my friend is now with new friends, right? I feel disconnected from them. Essentials, which is like, again, the hunger, the am I hungry? Am I thirsty? Am I overtired? These kinds of things. And then safety. Am I feeling like whatever is going on right now, I'm feeling unsafe, and this is where the anger is coming out. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at those. And the acronym for that is FACES. Right? So if you can remember FACES and go through those: flow, agency, connection, essential, safety. And if you can look at those first and have some understanding, it's, it was about this. And then go into the mean. The term mean is really about an outward behavior. And so we're concerned about the outward behavior, yes, but we're also even more concerned about the heart, right? What is happening in the heart? And so if we can go down that list and kind of like understand, is it coming from this or this? Okay, great. And then address the behavior. So we're kind of going backwards, right? We're going from the inside outwards. And talking about, Well, we were mad at the friend, so because they're hanging out with different friends, so we broke everything in their pencil box. That would be like mean behavior, right? That we're concerned about, right? So talking about how, I understand that you would feel that way. That would be so frustrating or so hurtful, and there's other ways to deal with this, right? There are other tools we can give to manage or transform, right? We talked about this earlier. Yeah. Transform that anger or deal with it instead of acting out with this behavior.
Yeah.
And we kind of said earlier, the more that the brain connects anger to just unleashing it, the more that is established, the easier it is to do that.
Okay.
So if we can break that pretty early and give appropriate tools, there's less likelihood that mean behavior will start to develop and come out. Because let's not lie, it feels good, right? Like it feels good to act in our anger sometimes, whether it's yelling or, breaking someone's things because they offended us, right? This feels good, but we also know it's not beneficial for us in the long run. And so we want to really kind of try to curtail that early on.
Yeah. So how long can that process be? Especially dealing with it later on in kids. I know I've talked with parents who, they're dealing with older kids, trying to figure out walking through some of these things, and because all of that is like, oh, that sounds so good. What's the reality of of the kind of patience we have to have as parents to get to see some progress?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm so glad you brought that up. And so the reality is, at the minimum, 7 to 21 days. Okay, with a stronger likelihood that you're going to be at that 21-day mark. Okay, so I would say giving it roughly a month's time of, we are understanding we're working on this skill for the next month. And that's the foundation. If you're familiar with the work of Dr. Carolyn Leaf, she wrote the book Switch on Your Brain. It's a great read. And it talks about, from a biblical lens, how did these patterns get established, right? Okay. And then how do we undo them, therefore, because we're recognizing they're not helpful for us. And she says at the minimum, we need 21 days to establish a new pattern. Okay. So as you're working on these steps with your kiddos, don't expect immediate results, right? It is going to be a sowing. But guess what? Scripture promises us, what we sow, we will reap, right? So know, as you're going through this process, I'm sowing. I'm going to keep sowing.
And this is for like a specific skill. So like there's multiple of these all throughout a kid's life at different times. Sometimes multiple at one time, but it takes time constantly.
Yes. So what, like one skill is that 21 days. So if we're trying to break the pattern, let's say of no hitting, right? And I'm going to remind you, no hitting. And before hitting your sibling, you will do this. And then if you're not able to, we're going to do this, right? Maybe we're going to go safe space. We're going to go to the trampoline, whatever. And we'll calm down together. And again, reminder, my job is to keep you safe. So that's why I'm keeping these boundaries in place. And then we'll come back and we'll talk to the sibling and we'll practice, right? Meaning we're going to practice the situation before it even happens. Before the anger's there and that emotion and the dysregulation of our nervous system's present, we're going to do it in a calm pattern, right? So back to the Legos. We're obsessed with Legos today. All right.
That's a good, it's relevant.
Yeah. The Legos got broken, right? And you are angry and you just want to reach out and whack your brother for breaking your Legos. Okay. Let's pretend we're doing that in the room, right? Before this is actually happening, and I'm role playing the brother, and I broke it, and we're going to go through these steps and practice this in a calm fashion. And again, that's the one skill. That is a 21-day process at least. And then longer for making it what's called a new habit, right? Okay. So the skill is in place. We know how to do that. It's hopefully becoming more the norm, but it's a couple month process, right? About a 3-month process of it becoming the habit. So now that connection, that neural pathway in the brain is there, and it's easier then for that pathway to fire. Okay. I like giving the example for parents and clients I work with of like the Oregon Trail. You know how the Oregon Trail was well trodden. People went down it for a reason. If you've ever hiked in nature off trail, it's hard work, right? There's all stuff. You don't know where you're walking. You don't even sometimes know where exactly I'm going and where the end point is, right? Yeah. That feels very scary. So the brain and the nervous system are naturally going to do things that have felt more comfortable, and we know what the result will be. Yeah. So this is a retraining of our brain.
Oh, that's great.
That is really good.
As we come to a close on our time, I'd love if you have any final thoughts, and also maybe some just some practical things. Maybe there's some books you can recommend. I often will recommend Parenting by Paul David Tripp. It's just a great biblical walkthrough of just different things, helping kids develop Christ-like character, not just behavior modification.
Good.
Which is, just
changing the perspective of we're not here to just change behavior, but to have our kids meet Jesus.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have our kids become more like Jesus. Yeah. So I'd love to hear just some things from you, and any other closing thoughts that maybe you're excited about coming up, or just things for parents to be aware of, and anything. I'll just let you kind of finish out those few minutes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, a curriculum, I guess you could call it, that I love is called Love and Logic. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of that, yep.
Yeah. Yes, Love and Logic is wonderful. And this can also really, in certain ways, I'm saying this cautiously because I realized to parents, when you say put the kid in the driver's seat, we were like, what? Right? Like, I don't know if I want that. But it really works with natural consequences. Okay. And so this has worked beautifully in our household. A real quick example would be setting a timer and saying, now we homeschool, so we have a little bit more flexibility in the mornings, but I can say, hey, we have 30 minutes to be ready for our day. Not, hey, go brush your teeth right now. Instead, I'm going to set that, and you could set 10 minutes, right? Hey, you have 10 minutes to go get dressed and get your teeth brushed. That's reasonable. Yeah. And that way, again, that agency, it's giving the child the ability to choose when that's going to happen. I have one who's going to go and do it right away. Yeah, right. I have one who's going to dilly-dally for 5-7 minutes. And then what the logical consequence, if you will, is at the end, when that timer goes off, you need to drop whatever you're doing and go do that. To go do what I requested. So it has this fail safe in it, right? Where it gives them the agency, but then also makes sure it gets it done. And so I really love Love and Logic. They have great workshops for like $20, some of them. One I saw the other day was dealing with heated moments, dealing with tantrums in young children. So if this is your stage of life, definitely go on and look on their curriculum and pick out some. Their whole curriculum altogether is about $700. So it's not totally unreasonable. Last thoughts. Yeah, practice, right? Practice, role play, revise as necessary. And know that whatever we said today, if you're sitting here listening and saying, well, that would never work in my household, know that this is about process, as you mentioned earlier, right? To be goal-oriented or focused, leaves a lot of room for feeling of failure in between. So if you can instead shift into looking at this is the process that we're in, and failure is going to happen. And that's just inevitable. We're going to lose our cool. I'm going to lose my cool. You might too. But we are moving towards what our goal is. This, I think, unloads some of that pressure for families. And then maybe find an accountability family, right? Find someone in your community, your church, to say, hey, we're working on this. Can we have a check-in once a week and just ask me specifically, how's it going this week? Because life is busy, right? We get hectic, and to be intentional with your family, I know for me, having accountability there is really helpful.
Yeah. That's awesome. Atara, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been so good. At Lake City Church, we believe in a thriving next generation, and that's the reason for having this. We know that these things in the household are so important, so I'm grateful for you for taking the time. Lake City Church, can't wait to see you next time. Hey, thanks for joining us today as we had Atara here to talk about anger in the household. It's such an important topic for families, and I would encourage you might know others that could benefit from this. Feel free to share it. Also comment what you got out of this episode, and even what you'd like to hear us talk about next. Thank you for joining us on the Lake City Church podcast, and I can't wait to join you again wherever you listen or watch.